Heart, Sass and Soul. Journal Your Way to Inspiration and Happiness by Greta Solomon. Introduction. When my mother was a young girl, she played the piano, and when her family moved, they took her beloved piano with them. But it wouldn't fit in the entrance to their new flat. They tried every which way to get that hunk of wood up the stairs, but it wouldn't budge. And in that moment, her piano playing life ended. It just didn't fit. Fast forward around 20 years later, and she was determined that her children would play the piano. Each of us duly went to lessons, but we never found the magic that she had experienced. That was her path, not ours, and we could never replicate the love and joy she felt for the music of the keys. The path to self-love is difficult to navigate if it's littered with thwarted dreams and silenced music. It's no longer made to measure Valentino. Instead, it's more hand-me-down from an aunt 2 sizes too big, or that whippet-thin cousin whose thigh is the size of your wrist. It doesn't fit, it tugs, it pulls, itches, it scratches. We can also pick at our wounds compulsively, like the urge to pick at a scab, until the freeing feeling of getting it off is replaced by the wincing rawness of unhealed skin. This is when we can become susceptible to criticism. Throwaway comments, insensitive observations, and downright nastiness can fester, and if there's no creative buffer, they can take hold. They can worm their way into your life, your psyche, your experience. Like a piece of wood made gnarled and mouldy, it can seem as though your self-expression is tangled. The unwanted thoughts, fearful tries, and inevitable failures that are par for the course when expressing yourself can seem like clear signs that it's game over. Unspoken agendas. Let's look at criticism for a moment, because if you're anything like me, you'll have heard a lot of it in your life from a variety of angles. Here's some of the criticism I've heard. You're too quiet and sensitive. You don't know how to get along with people. You laugh too loudly. You have short legs. Yes, I really did hear that one. But what is interesting is that for almost every criticism I've heard from someone, I've heard the exact opposite from someone else. Well, actually almost, because unfortunately no one's ever told me that I have long legs. So here is some of the praise I've heard. You're one of the most outgoing people I've ever met. You've got such drive and determination. You're really good at building relationships with people. So, who's right and who's wrong? And what does it all mean? Well, it means that words come with an agenda. People say things to get us to behave in a certain way. For instance, you're too quiet could really be someone saying, I'm not comfortable with silence. And you laugh too loudly could mean, I feel depressed and your laughter reminds me of how unhappy I am. But instead of stating a flaw or weakness in themselves, they flip it back as a criticism, hoping that you'll mould yourself to suit them. So ultimately, the only thing that matters is what we believe. The stories we tell ourselves and the world hold the key to our individual happiness. If you live by other people's agendas, then it's likely that you'll behave in ways that don't serve your higher self. Can you relate to this? To the need to please, to be liked, to be loved, so much that you take the criticism and, like a sculptor, begin chiseling away at yourself until over time your structure falls. You took too much away here and left not enough there, and now you're broken and in pieces, so you have to try and put yourself back together. Except now some pieces don't fit you anymore. You're new and different and not necessarily better. You wish you had never started chipping away at yourself. But now you can't stop chasing some illusion of perfection that was never there and can never be there. Where is the truth? When you embrace, believe, and embody criticism without questioning what's behind it, you can start to believe that you're not good enough. That's when your perception of the world becomes skewed. So, a key sign is that you keep finding yourself in situations where criticism, bullying, and harsh words are rife. That's not necessarily to say that you are being bullied yourself, just that judgment, cattiness, and calling people out seems to happen all too frequently. Plus, if you're the one that people find fault with, you can start to feel less and less. Worse still, you may be left with no idea how to remedy the predicaments you find yourself in. And if there are no unfriendly people like this in your life, it actually doesn't mean that you're off the hook. Maybe you have a critical inner voice bullying you, pushing you around, and telling you you're not good enough. Maybe you're telling yourself that you're a failed piano player who doesn't deserve to have music in her life. Maybe you're telling yourself that you're just not good at writing, that you can't spell, and that your grammar is crap. Maybe you're telling yourself that you want to write, you really do, but you don't want to dig too deep. What if your ex-boyfriend, grandmother, or childhood best friend sues you after reading the things you wrote about them? That's not to say that you need to believe you're the greatest, the best thing ever, and all superior. That's a fast track to an emotionally empty life. Instead, there's a more optimal way, a middle path of love. One where you don't judge anything about yourself as good or bad and instead view it as information. Get to know yourself with an open heart and accept what you find. Then write what you find, express yourself, and take care of your needs first. Put fear to one side and create first. Love and acceptance are gifts we desperately need to give ourselves, and they're essential for living a fully expressed life. In the coming pages, you'll find stories, ideas, food for thought, writing tools and techniques, and creative challenges and exercises that will help you to write your way to a self-expressed life. I'll coax you into expressing what you truly think and expressing what you truly feel. And I'll help you to write through the darkness until you pierce shadows of light. I'll also look at the negative events that happen to us all that are trying to guide us. The catch is if you're not attuned to reading the signs and serendipities, the world will look bleak. But try to look a little deeper and a little closer. If you can squint your eyes and peer through the looking glass of life, you'll see that signs and serendipities abound. You'll see them dance across your eyes, pointing out the path to self-love. Writing can clear a path to self-love. So, who am I? Well, I'm not a love expert. Who is? I think each of us is a work in progress. But I am a writer, teacher, and creative writing coach. I've also lived a rich and varied life, and I'd like to share what I've learned. And it's perhaps surprising I want to do this, as I grew up wanting to hide. In fact, I think easily embarrassed is a phrase that accurately sums up my early childhood. But over time, I became adept at hiding in plain sight, on stages and in auditoriums. I sang, danced, ran, jumped, and played music. I was deputy head girl at middle school and head girl at high school. One friend nicknamed me Shiny Happy Person after the REM song. Yes, I smiled a lot and had a shiny forehead, something I thankfully seem to have grown out of. I smiled and mixed, and all the while I hid. I was outgoingly, or outwardly rather, positive and friendly. I got along, but inside I felt that no one really understood who I was. So I wrote songs at first. It was 1988 and I would listen to Madonna songs on repeat on my tinny cassette player and write down all the lyrics. Then I would pick them apart to figure out the structure and why this rhymed with that and so on. I became a little 9-year-old connoisseur of love songs. I wrote and wrote about love and loss, love and loss, the two themes that define most adult lives. But I also started to realise that writing could be powerful because it could help me speak up for myself. So I started to put my thoughts on paper in other ways. I wrote letters to my favourite magazines, Hi and Lookin', and got such a buzz when they were actually published. Here's an example of one where I gushed about my favourite TV programme. I think the Wide Awake Club is brilliant. The bed making competition is fantastic. I think the WAC team must be rich because they give away such a lot of prizes. I mean, it's hardly Shakespeare, but it gave me a taste for the power of words. Since those days, I've written and written and written. 2 non-fiction books, including this one, a novel, currently unfinished, thousands of articles, some published in magazines, some stuffed in drawers, some languishing on old hard drives, morning pages, 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing first thing, as inspired by Julia Cameron, poems, more songs, blog posts, press releases, newsletters, speeches, award entries and articles as a director at a business-to-business PR consultancy, journals, affirmations, shopping lists, both literal and spiritual, scribbles here, there and everywhere. I continued to ask for things. For instance, after I graduated from university, I wrote letters to virtually every women's magazine in London asking for a work experience placement. A couple of magazines took me up on my offer, and that's how I became a journalist. I realised that through writing, I could ask for things that I wouldn't dare to speak out loud. Better still, I could write things into existence. But what if you feel blocked and stifled? What if you write but never really say what you need to say? Well, I've been there. For the first 6 or 7 years of being a journalist, I couldn't freely express myself when writing. There's a quote by Red Smith that I love. When asked how he got his newspaper column done every week, he said, "You just sit at your typewriter until little drops of blood appear on your forehead." And that's kind of how it was for me too. I was good at writing, but it came at a huge price. It simply wasn't easy. My block or writing personality was governed by fear. We'll look at this more in chapter 1, and you'll figure out which kind of writing personality you have. I used to leave all my writing to the last minute and only get it done through fear. Fear of losing my job, fear of losing my colleagues' respect. There was so much strain and pressure that it was exhausting. And there was one time where my writing personality worked against me in a big way. My first journalism job was at a businesswomen's magazine, and it was the kind of place where you worked for a year or 2 as deputy editor straight out of journalism school before moving on. While looking for my next gig, I was invited by IPC Media, now part of Time Inc., to interview for a position at a new women's lifestyle magazine that was launching. I was invited to do a trial day and all was going well until I was asked to write a sample feature. And I just couldn't do it. I kept crossing out and rewriting sentences. I couldn't decide on the angle, the introduction, or anything for that matter. In the end, I submitted a paragraph. Yes, just one paragraph. I will never forget the look on the editors' faces. I can laugh about it now, but at the time it was mortifying. Ironically, my next job, which I got a few weeks later, was in the same building. I was hired as a features writer at another women's magazine covering someone's maternity leave. I was 23, and on paper it was the dream job, and I should have been having the time of my life. But I didn't feel authentic, and I felt creatively blocked. I just didn't have the easy flow of ideas that I have now. I didn't feel I had a voice, and I felt like I was on a conveyor belt churning out articles. I just didn't feel creative. So when my contract was up, I went freelance as a journalist, cranking out articles for newspapers and magazines in my force-driven way. But crucially, I decided to explore my creativity and see where it led. I enrolled at a London drama school and starred in adverts and short films. I became a travel writer and explored health and wellness. I did voice and improvisation classes. I wrote lots of songs and poems and got some of them published. All of these experiences helped with my self-expression, but things really shifted for me 4 years later when I began studying lyric writing at Berklee College of Music. The first thing we learned was a technique called object writing, which is something that songwriters use to help them get raw materials for songs. And it was life-changing. I'll introduce you to this technique later in this book and show you how you can put it into practice in your everyday life. What's for sure is that object writing opened me up, and I was finally able to write freely and expressively. And this way of writing crossed over into my journalism work and all the other writing work I did after that. After undergoing such a transformation, I realised that I wanted to train as a life coach and teacher and teach people to write. I started off tutoring students and taught them the object writing and other self-expression and writing techniques I'd learnt from my lyric writing diploma, and it was a big hit. I got a reputation for turning C-grade students into A-grade students because they became self-expressed writers. And I turned my methods into the book Just Write It, How to Develop Top-Class University Writing Skills. I found what I was supposed to do, and I realised that I loved helping people to better express themselves in writing, and that's what I've been doing ever since. The crucial thing is that I feel completely free and able to express myself in writing both privately and publicly. In your own room and your own space, you ought to be able to write freely, to cry, to laugh, to feel the feelings. And sometimes you need to write something that's raw and not for public consumption. Something that wouldn't please your 8th grade grammar teacher or your boss, but that pleases you. But if you do want to shape your writing into a finished piece, then that's great too. And I'm going to share some tools and techniques that will help you to do that. In fact, creative self-expression is cyclical. And if you can add technique to heart and soul, you can keep going deeper down through the layers. I'll also share my tips for going a step further and creating personal creative blog posts. Plus, if you're already an accomplished writer, the stories and lessons in this book will help you to go deeper and inspire you to access your writing space from a position of love. Most of all, I want you to know that what you hold in your hands now or consume via your screen or audio device is an invitation. It's an invitation to begin to live a fully expressed life. A love lesson as told to me by Yair Segi. Finally, I'd like to end this introduction with a short meditation. Put your hands on your heart and imagine the space within. Feel your heart and then see your inner child. Look in her eyes and give her a hug. Love her. Take care of her needs. Be kind to her. Protect her from harm. Listen to her. Laugh with her. Give her treats. Take her for a day out. Be a parent to the little girl inside you. And remember this. When you love yourself, it's easy to put up boundaries because you don't fear rejection. You can easily say no. Repeat the affirmation, I love myself. Repeat it again. Then imagine the roar of a lion and its power and say, I am creative, fertile, serene, and powerful like a mountain. Be love. Exude love. Let it fill your whole body and radiate outwards. And remember that writing for creative self-expression will help to set you free.